The steps to writing our own piecewise function are found in the box. So the first thing that we want to do is we need to find the equation of the line. So remember, the piecewise function is made up of different functions, so we need to find each line, and then we will decide what the domain needs to be, and we'll create our piecewise function. So when you're finding the equation of a line, the first thing you want to do is find 2 points on the line, so that way you can find the slope, and then you use that point and the slope in point-slope form, and you solve for y. So if we look at this first graph, I'm going to pick 2 points on that graph. I'm going to pick this point, and I'm going to pick this point. Okay, so if I want to find the slope, so this is kind of like a refresher. To find the slope, I have to do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so that will find us the slope. Then we use point-slope form. If you don't like point-slope form, you can use slope-intercept form, but point-slope form will be a little bit faster. So point-slope form is when you have y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, so you should remember this from algebra. And then if you want to do slope-intercept form, color, slope-intercept form. That's your y equals mx plus b. So in that one, you'd have to find your y-intercept and then plug it back in to find your equation. Point-slope form is just a little bit faster. Okay, so if we look at this first line, the left side of this line, okay, I could try to count the slope. Okay, so if you want to pick 2 points and try to count your slope, you can, but sometimes it's just easier to calculate it, so you make sure that you have it correct. So I'm going to use those 2 points. So I'm going to use, so each of these tick marks is 2. So if I use -2, 4, and I use -4, -2. Okay, so those are the 2 that I'm going to use. So I'm going to find the slope. So I'm going to do -2 minus 4 over -4 minus -2. Okay, so you can go in either way. You can do like y1 minus y2, but then you'd have to do x1 minus x2. So just keep everything the same. So this way, I get -6 on the top, and then on the bottom I have the 2 negatives become a positive. This gives me -2, and I end up with 3. So my slope here is 3. So then I'm going to use point-slope form. So I'm going to pick one of these points. Okay, it doesn't matter which one I use. I'm just going to use the first point. So if I use this first point, I'm going to do y minus my y. So y minus 4 equals my slope, which is 3, times x minus my x. So I have minus a -2. So that's going to become plus a positive. So I'm going to distribute that 3. So I get y equals, y minus 4 equals 3x plus 6. And then I add my 4. So now I have y equals 3x plus 10. So that's the left side of the line. So let's do this. So when we go to write our piecewise function, we have f of x equals, and then we're going to have like a little curly bracket. So the first function, you always go left to right. So the first function is that y equals 3x plus 10. So I'm going to put in here 3x plus 10. But then I need my restriction here. So if we look at it, it's stopping at when x is -2. So it's -2 and less. So it's hard to see here what's an open circle and what's a closed circle because they're connected. So it doesn't matter which function you choose to have the open circle and which one you choose to have the closed circle, as long as one is open and one is closed. So they both can't be open and they both can't be closed. So we said x has to be less than -2. Okay, so I'll leave that as less than. Now the second function, I'm just going to do this in red. So this was our first function. Our second function is this piece right here. And that's just the horizontal line y equals 4. So when I go to write this, I have 4. And then that is between -2 and +2. So since it didn't include the -2 in the previous function, I'm going to include it here. So -2 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 2. Is that what I said? Yeah. So again, that 2, at some point it's going to be included. So you can include it here, or you can include it in the next one. So then the next one, again, you would pick 2 points, plug them in, and solve for the line. It's just going to be the same one as the one that we first did, except the slope is going to be negative. So you can plug it in and figure it out. But it's going to end up being -3x plus 10. And that part of the line, this piece right here, that's where x is greater than 2. And since the previous one did not equal 2, we're going to equal this one to 2. X is greater than or equal to 2. So now we've written our piecewise function. Okay, so let's look at the second example. So this one's a little bit easier. We can kind of count the slope on this one. So we have the left part of the graph, which is this line. It's crossing at 0, so it has a y-intercept of 0. And if we count the slope, it's a slope of 1, because it's going, down 1, left 1, down 1, left 1. So it's a -1 over a -1, which is 1. So I'm going to rewrite this here. So the left side is just y equals x, and it's less than 0. So I'll say x is less than, I'll make this one less than or equal to 0. Okay, just one of them has to equal 0. So let's say this one does. Now the second part of this line here, if you count that slope, it's up 2 over 1. So there's a slope of 2, a y-intercept of 0. So that's 2x. And that is greater than 0. So since I already included the 0, I'm not going to include it here. Okay, and that one would be that function. Okay, so let's look at these ones. So now the first one, it's a little hard to see because there's no lines in them. But if you look at the blue line, so the blue line has a slope of 1, and if you continued with it, it would cross through -1. So that function is going to be x minus 1. And if you're not sure, pick points and plug them in. And that one is going to be less than -1, and it doesn't include the -1. So we don't have the line underneath. So x is less than -1. Now, that pink dot is actually our second function. So if you were to draw a line horizontally through that dot, that would be the line y equals -1. And since it's a closed circle, it's only at that one spot. So we're going to say that x equals -1. And then our third line, that red line, it crosses through 1, so the y-intercept is 1. And if you count that slope, it's also going to be a slope of 1. So that's x plus 1. And then that is going to be greater than -1 because it's an open circle. Okay, if we look at the one underneath, the left function is a parabola. So it has a y-intercept of 0. And so this is just going to be x squared, because if you plug in values like -1, if you square it, you get 1. If you plug in -2 and you square it, you get 4. So that's just x squared. And it's an open circle, so x is less than 0. The second function is the line y equals 2. And that has a closed circle at 0, so 0 is going to be less than or equal to x. Fix that 0. And it also includes 3. So we're going to have less than or equal to 3. And then our last function has a slope of -1 since it's going down. So again, you can find your slope and then find your equation using the point slope form, or you can count your slope. So if I were to count it and continue it up, it would cross at 4. So this is going to be -x plus 4. And then it's an open circle, so x is greater than 3. Okay, and for this last one, if we look at the first part, so I'll just do this on another page. The first function on the left is a horizontal line. So let's just say each of these lines is 1. So that's going to be at 4. So y equals 4. And then, again, we don't know if it's an open or closed circle. So one of them will be open, one of them will be closed when we get to when x is -3. So let's just say this one is an open circle. So x is less than -3. For the second line, you can kind of count the slope. It crosses at -2, so that's your y-intercept. And if you continue to count the slope, it's down 2 over 1, so it's going to be a -2x slope, and then -2, because that's the y-intercept. -2x minus 2. And it's between -3 and 1, so we'll say that it includes the -3. So -3 is less than or equal to x, and then the 1 has a closed circle, so less than or equal to 1. Okay, and for the last line, this one's like a little bit harder to see. You can count the slope, but it's a little bit tricky. So if we pick 2 points on here, I'm going to pick the open circle point, so that's 1, 3. And then I'm going to pick this point, and that's 3, 2. So if I use this, plug this into here. So I'm using 1, 3 and 3, 2. So if I find my slope, I'm going to do 2 minus 3 over 3 minus 1. So I get -1 over 2. So -1/2 is my slope. And then I'm going to use point slope form. So I'm going to use the first equation. So y minus 3 equals -1/2 x minus 1. So I get y minus 3, I'm going to distribute, equals -1/2 x plus 1/2. And then I'm going to add 3. So when I add 3, 3 is the same thing as 6/2. So what I have is -1/2 x plus 7/2. So that's going to be my function. So I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to plug in -1/2 x plus 7/2. So that's that function. And then it's an open circle when x is 1, and it's going greater than. So we're going to say x is greater than 1. And then that would be our function.